Hello, my name is Tucker Johnson, and I am your host today as we experience NIMSY Live, where we talk about the latest and greatest in translation, localization, internationalization, culturalization, and all that fun stuff that global companies need to delight their international customers, or at least not piss them off too much. On this program, we invite guests who like to have fun and have some value to add for our audience of globalization professionals. I'm always eager to provide a platform to those with a good story or a good data set. So let us know if there are any topics you'd like covered or guests we should reach out to for future episodes. If you haven't already done so, make sure that you are subscribed to NIMSY Insights. We're coming to you live today on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and a couple others, I think. So whatever platform of choice that you're logging in on, make sure that you subscribe or follow, and you will be one of the first people to be informed when we publish new podcast episodes or publish new research from our research team here at NIMSY Insights. And without further ado, and since the music just conveniently ended, I will give a quick introduction to the topic today, what we're talking about. We are talking with Michele Hecken about her experience with the mergers and acquisition process. She is I should say, the owner of Alpha Translations in Canada, and several years ago, went through an exit with her company and sold her company, and now is off doing fun stuff, consulting stuff, which we're going to get into here later. So in her previous life, she was owner of Alpha Translation, but today she is an executive coach and author specializing in working with successful entrepreneurs and CEOs to help them create a fun, fearless life and business so that they have more time, energy, focus, and joy in their lives. Oh, I stumbled through that introduction. Correct me, Michele. What am I missing here?
Hi, Tucker. That was great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Nothing missing there. And yeah, I'm happy to be on the show. I'm excited to chat with you. Seeing that when I sold my company in January 2019, NIMSY helped me through the process and helped me find a buyer. And so I'm very happy to be here and chat with you.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for the plug. You've prevented me from having to plug myself, but I'll still do that right now. For those of you that aren't aware, NIMSY is very involved in the mergers and acquisition space, particularly in the language services industry. And we're hoping to answer some of your questions. If you're a company owner out there that is interested in the idea, thinking about maybe one day retiring and doing something fun, or doing something different, I should say, because running an LSP is, of course, fun, then reach out to us, M&A@nimsy.com, or just info@nimsy.com. We'll put you in touch with Jonathan Otis, who runs that practice for us. And some of the companies that we've helped find successful partners for their exit, right here, as you can see, Alpha Translations Canada is front and foremost. So, Michele, I have some rough questions lined up for us today, but as you know, we're just going to have a very conversational podcast today. But I wanted to start off by asking you, what were the deciding factors in your exit? So, did you just wake up one day and say, I can't take this anymore, I need out, I need to go find something else, I'm sick of running an LSP? What was the thought process when you were deciding to exit your company?
Great question, Tucker. What was the thought process that got me to exit my company? It developed over several years. And so I started my company when I was 23 or something like that. And I started it in 1993 with a fax machine, pre-internet. And we served clients from Canada, like from our location in Canada. We served clients in Europe doing overnight translations. And so I ran the company for about 25 years. I put a team in place. I had a fantastic team. My COO basically executed my vision and ran the company. So I wasn't really involved in the day-to-day for many, many years. So it then begs the question, well, if you're not working that much and you're looking at strategy and all of those things, and traveling all over the world, why would you want to sell and give up your cash flow? And I got that question from a lot of people. And for me, it was really simply, I wanted to do something different. Basically, half of my life, all of my adult life, that's what I had done, and I enjoyed it and I loved it. And I felt it was just time to change and explore different ideas, coupled with, and I think a lot of LSP owners probably feel that a little bit as well, coupled with the fact that after running it for 25 years, getting that energy to say, okay, machine translation, privacy legislation,
What's
all
the
of
next
those
thing?
things. What's the next thing?
The
And
good news about language services industry is that there's always something new. It's always
there
something
is.
exciting to learn. The bad news about the language services industry is there's always something new. There's always something exciting to learn.
Exactly. And I actually had to ask myself really honestly is, do I have the energy and the enthusiasm to kind of rebuild and build up the company again with the recent developments and with the recent technology? And unlike you, playing around with new technology and doing those things is not one of my favorite things to do. And so I talk about, let's work on our strengths and let's work on what we're really great at. And that wasn't me. And so it was just time for me to embark on a new adventure.
Well, there you have it. And I'm sure there's lots of people out there in your shoes. I know there's lots of people out there in your shoes because we talk to those people. And in my mind, there's not even my mind, in my experience talking to LSP owners out there, there's people that want to sell. There's people that are thinking about selling, and then there's people that it's not even on their mind, but in the back of their mind they know that one day they might need an exit strategy. And what we tell people who perhaps aren't ready to pull the trigger yet, engage a broker and start shopping their company around, because there's quite a bit of work, as you know, that goes into this process. It's like selling a house but on steroids,
Yeah.
essentially. So what we tell people is, even if you're not wanting to pull the trigger right now, there are certainly some things that you can do to help prepare for an exit one day, because you don't want to get into a position where you need to sell right now because you just can't do it anymore. You're fed up, but your company's not going to get the price that you expect from it because you haven't done a few simple things. So next, I'd like to ask about preparing for the exit. What were some of the steps that you took in your experience, and I know it's different for everybody,
Yeah.
that set you up for success through the process?
Huh. Um, I wish I would have taken more steps to prepare. So
Hindsight's
let me
always
put it
2020. Yeah.
exactly. So it was really hard on my team. So I had an amazing team, and most of them I think are still there. And basically the due diligence part, and we did it fast. Like the process was fast.
You did.
I
I remember. It
Yeah,
was a whirlwind for you
yeah, I
guys.
accepted the offer. I think on my birthday,
Oh, happy
in
birthday.
October. Yeah, in October, and then the closing date was supposed to be December 16th.
Mhm.
So really only 3 months. And we ended up closing January 16th, just with Christmas and just some things. But it was so much work for my team, and obviously for me, of course, too. So one of the things I wish I would have prepped more, even years before, if you're thinking there's an exit somewhere on the horizon, is to really like go through all of your contracts, make sure everything is in place so that your team has time to put all of those things together, so they don't have to spend 12, 14 hours a day, which is what my team did, to back me up on all of this. Really just getting the due diligence ready. It is a lot of work, but if you can prepare at least half of it, you could easily prepare, over the years before. And then when it comes, it's a lot easier on your team. So that's something I wish I would have known and prepped a little sooner.
Yeah, so just keeping good books, keeping your wicks trimmed, and having all of that stuff, because in that due diligence process, it's an audit essentially. If for
Yeah.
those of us that have ever been audited by the IRS here in the U.S. or somebody else, is they want to look at everything, they want to dive deep into everything, and sometimes, and if to my listeners out there, I'm not saying this is necessarily you, but rumor has it that there are some LSPs out there that are not keeping the cleanest books, cleanest records. Not everything is available at a minute's notice. And those are the companies that, in our experience, we see struggle with this process a little bit because, when a potential investor, potential buyer comes and says, I want your accounts receivable aging summary. It's like, well, we don't have that report. So you actually have to go and create a brand new report. Or I want a list of all of your customers sorted by revenue for the last 3 years. And so,
Yeah.
well, we don't keep that report, right? So companies that don't, as a matter of business, keep, I don't want to say good, but let's say thorough reporting, it's not a blocker so much, it's just more work for them. Because not only do they have to provide the information, they have to gather the information and before they can even provide it.
I agree, Tucker. And to add to that too, I mean, we had all of that in place. Luckily, like we had immaculate records, we had all the reports, but sometimes the buyer wants to see them a little bit differently.
Right.
Right. So, for example, we did gross margin based on revenue minus translator editor costs. We didn't put our project managers on that top gross margin line, but the buyer wanted to see it that way. Right. So now you have to redo your reports, which is fine. But if you're not used to the practice of keeping your books properly, you're not going to exude the same confidence in the conversations, because even if you prep and you have those numbers, if you're not working with those numbers all the time and you're used to them, you're going to come off a little insecure when the buyer asks you questions. So there's another benefit to really kind of preparing all of that ahead of time. And also for translation companies, for localization companies, like we have a lot of NDAs and contracts. I mean, we work with law firms. There were so many. And in our case, so many of them were in German.
Right.
Right. So
you got
to, yes, we
know any
had
good
to
translators?
Exactly. So like the contract piece really took a ton of time to organize, to put in place. And so that is something that you can do years before. And so when that comes, yes, you're going to be busy with due diligence and all of those numbers and questions and opening your kimono, which, when you're selling to a competitor, a large competitor, is also a process that needs to be managed.
Yep.
But you're just going to be so much more prepared to know what to say at what point in time, because you've been working with these numbers all along. So I would definitely second what you said about getting into the habit of having proper record keeping and proper and knowing how to analyze it. I know it's also one of Renato's favorite topics. It's like, if you don't know how to read your balance sheet and your P&L nothing jumps out at you.
We're not on the balance sheet.
You have a
He
problem.
loves talking about balance sheets.
Yeah.
But it's true. It's true. Because, and all of this leads me into the next theme I wanted to touch on here, which is valuation, right? All of this is leading up to a valuation process. If you're selling your company, that buyer needs to know how much it's worth. And the way that they do that is by looking under your kimono, essentially. And this is a process that I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. And all of this stuff, by the way, this is why I recommend to people, even if you're not looking to sell this year or in the next 6 months, talk to somebody. For example, Jonathan Otis here at NIMSY Insights, but it can be anybody, right? You can talk to a consultant who's been through this before. Talk to Michele. She has her own coaching business right now, which we're going to show a little bit later. and just get an idea, because you want to make sure. We've talked to a lot of folks that they think that they are taking the right steps to prepare for an exit, and only after they pull the trigger and start talking to a broker, they realize, oh shoot, I was focused on the completely wrong areas. And if I had just focused on X, Y, and Z in the last 2 years, I would have gotten a much higher value. So let's talk about this valuation process, because at the end of the day, company owners who are considering selling, they have a number in their head. They have an idea of, if I were to ever sell my company, this is how much that I would expect to get from it, how much I think it's worth. And so we have our own number. Like if I were to sell Nimsy Insights today, here's the number in my head. And evaluators are going to have their own numbers, and then the market itself is going to have its own number, right? Depending upon market fluctuations and stuff right now. What were some of the, and I don't really have a well-formed question here, but were you surprised by anything in the valuation process, things that stood out to you?
Yeah, absolutely, Tucker. So the valuation, what I did is I looked at previous exits, who was buying, who bought whom, for which amount, and which multiple of EBITDA. So I did look into that, and so what stood out is that typically companies who own some kind of proprietary technology obviously got a higher multiple of EBITDA, and a higher valuation. What really helped me, and this is I talk about a little bit in the book that is not quite out yet, but I talk about offboarding. So what I did really successfully in my business is basically I offboarded myself from the active role in the company. So I had my COO, and we created the process. Most entrepreneurs or CEOs don't have a job description either, right? So we created that to make sure we wouldn't step on our toes, and really she ran everything. And so I didn't own the relationships with the clients. I didn't own the relationships with, I didn't own it. So I could walk away. And I had built my company and worked in that fashion, being offboarded, which allowed me to focus on strategy, which allowed me to focus on innovation and competitiveness, and kind of set the course for the goals. And my team executed. So it was great, because that allowed the buyer to come in and not have to worry at all about business continuity, because business continuity is a big factor in the valuation of your company. If you are working in your company as a project manager, or you own sales, or you own all the relationships with clients, and I hear this all the time when I coach other companies, not just in the language industry, where it's like, yeah, but I'm this and I have to own the relationships. I can't do it any other way. It's not true. You can totally do it in a different way, so that you don't own the relationships. And that's a huge contributing factor to your valuation. And I got a higher multiple than industry average for a company that doesn't own any proprietary technology. Because of that.
Yeah, super
and
important.
I got to walk away. There was no earnout, right?
So what tell us what an earnout is.
Well, sure. So when a company sells, you can either, there's various shades of gray here, but just for simplicity, you either get all cash and you walk away, or you get a chunk of cash and then they say, okay, I want you to stay for a year or 6 months or 2 years. And then once that is done, then you will get the rest of the money, or the rest of the money comes in installments. And the problem with that is you really have no control, because you're not setting the strategy, you're not setting the goals, you're not running the company. So whether you achieve those goals or not is not really fully in your control. So if you do have an earnout, make sure the goals that you negotiate, the KPIs for the payments, are as much in your control as possible. But the earnout often happens. I hear it so many times where you don't get the full amount. Something comes up, you don't hit this goal, right? So you kind of get less. You're still working in your company, which for me, I said, straight away. I didn't work in my company for the last 10 years. I'm not going to start working in it now. So I specifically only looked at deals that would allow me to walk away, because that was my goal. But when we're more involved in the company instead of working on the business, more often than not, we get offered an earnout, and it's just not ideal, I think.
Well, yeah, because a lot of times when someone wants to sell their company, they want to sell the company because they want to go buy a horse ranch
Yeah,
and retire, essentially, or
exactly.
whatever. Fill in the blank bucket list that you have. And this is a big surprise to a lot of people where it's like, oh, what do you mean? What is this earnout? You mean after I sell my company, I'm forced to work in it for 2 more years, which
Yeah.
is essentially what an earnout is. It says, no, no, no. Like, we're going to give you half of the money now, and then we're going to give
Mhm.
you half of the money later. And that's contingent upon you sticking around and meeting certain goals, which you just
Mhm.
talked about, Michelle. So that can be a big surprise. And this, your advice here is spot on, in my opinion. It's something that every entrepreneur founder should be thinking about, regardless of whether you want to pursue an exit strategy, because it's this working on your company rather than working in your company. If you're the most
Exactly.
if your company crumbles without you there to manage it, or if you are the top salesperson, you as the owner are the top salesperson in your company, which is a very, very common
Common.
scenario, especially in the language services industry, then you can never take a vacation. Like, forget about exit strategy. You can't take a vacation. You can't leave. If you get sick, your company's going to go under. And so, in my mind, it's just a best practice to be following regardless of whether you're pursuing an exit strategy.
Yeah, I agree, Tucker. And to add on to that, um, you're stunting the growth of your company
You are?
if you're the bottleneck. And I see it so many times when people start another company and all of a sudden their first company grows like crazy. Why? Because they got out of it. And really kind of setting that up. I mean, one of my favorite quotes from Richard Branson is like, I don't just loosely, I'm not quoting him exactly, but I don't distinguish between work and life. It's all life. And I talk about that in my book as well. That work-life balance is kind of bullshit, because as entrepreneurs, we love what we're doing. So
Right.
when we say, okay, now I've worked X
Right.
amount of hours, right? Now I have to do something to offset that. Well, work is life too.
Yep.
And we should be enjoying that. And we can set it up in a way where we can enjoy life, where we can cascade it through to our team, where we're all working to our strengths as much as we can, and everybody's happier.
Yep.
And looking at that process, and then the biggest thing is empowering your team. It's the biggest thing. We're always told, in order to work on your business, we have to delegate more.
Hmm. Yeah.
Right? That's what we're told.
Hmm.
And I'm here to tell you, you need to stop delegating completely, because delegating keeps you stuck in your business.
Oh, you're saying the team should be self-sufficient.
That's right.
Ah,
Because
okay.
what happens? So when we delegate, typically we delegate the stuff that we procrastinate on, right? And then it sits on our desk, and eventually we feel guilty, and it's got to get done, and we give it to somebody else to do it. And then we feel guilty because we feel like we're giving somebody else our garbage that we don't want to do,
Have you been reading
right?
my diary? Get out of my head.
Everybody does it.
Yeah.
And so, but I really want to drive this point home, because what happens then, first of all, we haven't purposefully taken a responsibility and given it to somebody else. We still own the responsibility. So it feels good to get something off your plate. So then you do it again, and then you do it again, and then eventually you wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, oh, who did I give that to? And who did I give this project to? And then what happens is you go in and you start micromanaging. It's like, how's that project going? Did I explain this? Do you need help? Blah, blah, blah. What's the message you're sending your team? The message is, I don't trust you. I don't think you can do this. And then what happens to us? We start burning out, because we're having to increase our mental load and keep thinking about all of these projects, versus in what I call the offboarding process, you're purposely looking at the responsibilities, you're looking at everything on your plate, and then you're looking at, what's the value to the company? How much time do I spend on it? Do I love it or do I loathe it? And then we can say, okay, let's take this responsibility, the whole thing, and give it to somebody else.
Yep.
And then you can now coach and train, and you're not just randomly delegating stuff off of your desk that doesn't help the company grow or scale, but you're doing it with purpose, and you're doing. And that's why I say stop delegating, because it's not mindful, it's not strategic. Empower your team and give them responsibility. And that will not only build you a better company, grow your revenue, create more value for an exit as well.
Yeah. Yeah. You won't be stuck with what is it called? The way they're forced to stick around. So
Yeah, the earnout.
The earnout, that's right. And and you're preaching to the choir here. As you may or may not know, Renato and I founded this company a little over 5 years ago. And when we first started talking, I was talking with Renato about, like, what do we want this company to be? How do we want the culture to be? And one of the things that I said to Renato is it's got to be fun. Like, it's got to be enjoyable, because I can go be miserable working for somebody else and frankly make more money and have health benefits.
Yeah.
Right? So if we're not having fun, then what's the point? And as soon as we could, probably a little bit earlier than we should have, but as soon as we could, we hired a CEO, or promoted a CEO, and Joseph Kubowski, many of you guys listening know Joseph as CEO of Nimsy Insights. I never got to be the CEO of my own company. I think the assumption was that Renato out there, he was the CEO when we first founded, and I was managing director was my title. And the assumption was that one day Renato would retire and I'd become CEO. And I skipped that step. And it was the best thing that I ever did, because now this podcast wouldn't exist if it weren't for that. Because like you said, focus on what you want to be doing, having fun. And the only reason that I can mess around and have these interesting conversations with people is because I'm not in the work day to day.
Yeah.
The company's running itself.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly. And it's just so important. But that we all know this as entrepreneurs. Like, if we've read any books, if we've heard any talks, it's what we hear: work on your business, not in it. But here's the thing: nobody gives you a roadmap to tell you how to do that.
It's faith. It's faith-based is what it is. There's a spiritual component to it as well. I'm sure there's a process too, but the processes start with taking that first step. And in my experience and opinion, that first step is a step of faith, essentially. You got to say, if I'm going to start down this journey, and it's going to be okay. Because a lot of times company owners, I use the example that company owners are the best salespeople in their own companies. And a lot of times it's because they are. Like, the other salespeople that are working for them don't close as many deals. They are the best salespeople. It's not this thing that's like in their head, right?
No.
So it's this faith-based thing where it's like, if I stop selling, my team is going to step up to the plate, and stuff's going to happen that needs to happen.
I agree, Tucker. You have to take that first leap of faith. But the first leap of faith is much easier to take when you know, okay, the first thing I'm going to do is list all of my responsibilities and value how much they bring the company forward, evaluate if I love doing them, and then come up with a plan of what you want to offboard to whom, so that you can coach those people to take that responsibility on. And I know I'm plugging a little bit here, but I talk about that whole process in The Art of Offboarding, my book, which will come out early next year. There is a process on how to offboard, on how to work on your business, that gives you checks and balances, that mitigates risk on your team, that empowers your people so that you can do it faster. Because one of the things that happens very often is we take that leap of faith, but we don't have processes and checks and balances in place. And we don't really take the time to coach the people to learn how this responsibility works. And it takes practice to make quick decisions. It does take practice. So there's an opportunity to be purposeful about it. And then it's a much easier process, because oftentimes we get out. But as soon as something happens, either our company's growing or our company's not doing well, we get pulled right back in.
Right.
And then we
Right.
have to do the whole process over again. And it's confusing as heck for the team. It's like, now we talk to you again? Well, no, before we're talking to this person. Oh, and as entrepreneurs, because we know our company, we don't just go in a little bit. When we go back in, we go full blast back
Yep.
in.
Yep.
Right?
Guilty as charged.
That's right.
Yep.
So it's important to have those processes in place so that when that temptation comes, you know what to do. So I'll share a little story. So I had offboarded myself from translating and proofreading, and trained my translators, trained my proofreaders, and I was now doing sales. This is early on, probably whatever, late 90s, early 2000s, something like that. And I walked in, and my project manager, who was my husband then, which I'm sure you all know. I'll share a little story. And so if he's listening, I hope he remembers the story. But I came in and I was about to go to the gym and kind of finally have a life after 20 hours of translating and proofreading for several years. And he said, "Hey, Michele, can you just proofread this one little paragraph? It's just a couple lines." And I'm like, and he was like, "Come on, like, it's going to take you less time to do this.
That's how it starts.
To send it out, right?
Of course, it's going to take you less time.
Of course."
Right.
And so, and I remember looking at him and feeling guilty as heck. And I said, "No." And I turned around and I walked out the door. I got in my car and I drove. And the guilt that I felt, oh my God, I felt like so petty. And why couldn't I do this? But here's why I said no. I knew that if I looked at that little thing, that I would find something. Of course, that's your job as a proofreader, right? You're going to find something. But I would have found something, and it would have undermined my faith that the team can do this.
Yep.
And I would have been like, oh no, and then what? And it would have, this way, the process is, it goes to the proofreader. We've trained the proofreaders, and that is that faith, right? It's like, I have to trust that they're going to step up. And if I look at it, it's the little things that get you pulled back in, because then it's like, oh, just look at this one too, and just look at this one too. And it just would have held the company back. And it was one of the most important no's that I actually said in my company early on. And I know that I felt very guilty, and it didn't make sense, but in the bigger picture, it's what I had to do. So we have to make sure we don't get pulled back in when we're coming out and rising, and having a process for it is really helpful.
Truth. And for those of you I brought up on screen here, offboard yourself. I put a link into the LinkedIn event here. So for those of you watching on LinkedIn, you can follow that link to find out more about offboarding yourself.
Oh, thank you.
So I think that's our main takeaway for today from the M&A process. But I want to bring it back a little bit to some of my questions, just because I spent so much time putting these questions together.
And they're great questions.
All of 5 minutes that I slaved away. But what were some of the surprises in the M&A process as you came across this? You sound like you were pretty competent moving through the process. Like you said, it moved quicker than you thought it was going to go. What were some of the things that stood out to you as like, oh my gosh, I wasn't expecting this. I wasn't expecting to have to hire a lawyer. I wasn't expecting to have to, negotiate with these people. Anything in particular?
I was really lucky. The offer that we got was fair. It was what I was looking for. The process was easy. I really have to hand it to RWS there, and they did.
They're pros.
Yeah, and this was before they merged. Well, not merged, whatever they want to call it, but they made it easy. Mm-hmm. There was some tough moments, yes, but they made it easy. There was a lot of trust there, and they never wavered. They weren't looking to kind of cut pricing, cut anything from their offer. And they were just very easy to deal with. So I really didn't have a ton of surprises at all. So I was very grateful for that process. It was busy, but for my team, like what I was surprised at, back to what we said earlier, is how much work it was, despite the fact that our records were immaculate.
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Despite the fact that we had all of the numbers, I didn't expect to have my team have to work so many hours to get this done. That was a big surprise. And then the other thing maybe that stood out is that it's very hard to manage the process of confidentiality for within your team,
yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
So that's a whole other topic. Who do you tell? Who do you not tell? You don't know if this deal is going to go through. At what point do you tell them?
Well,
And then when you tell some people, then they feel uncomfortable because they feel like now they know something that somebody else doesn't know. So that was hard.
yeah, and it's hard. Well, let's go there because that's one of the topics I wanted to touch on is the effect on the team. And I've been we're supposed to have Renato with us today, and he's been on the selling end, like you. He's sold, so he's had a couple exits himself, but right now he's over in Accra, Ghana, working with a client. And I see Adi that you're watching. I think you
Yeah.
tired Renato out. You kept him busy this week, so Adi's there in the comments. Greetings from Accra. And I've been on the receiving end where I was the project manager, the program director. And I mean, the senior management, of course, didn't come out and say, yes, we are selling our company and all of this stuff. But you can tell because those reports that you're asking about is like every day for several months, I was being asked for a new report on the new financials, plug the numbers this way,
Yeah.
plug the numbers that way.
Yeah.
So it's like to a certain extent, the team kind of knows that something's going on, but he's still got to be confidential about it,
Yeah.
right? But what other effects did you notice in your experience with the team? And then I can talk about some of my experience as a team member.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that. That would be, I think that would be really valuable. Well, yeah, it was difficult having obviously telling my COO, and then we kind of held it back, and then we had to tell the rest of the team because it was obviously just so much work. But then at some point it was really hard for them because they felt like they were lying to the rest of the team, even though they weren't physically lying, but they had to say things that maybe they didn't want to say. And for me, that was
Lying is
hard.
a harsh word. It's not lying.
No,
They were
no, it's not, but
being
that's how
discreet.
they
Yeah, yeah.
felt.
Yeah,
But
I know. That's how it
that's how they
feels. Like
felt.
I
That's
know,
how
as a
it feels.
manager, when I have information that I'm not allowed to share with my team, it feels like I'm lying to my team.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So nobody was lying, but that's how they felt. And I felt really bad that, that kind of was part of the process. And I don't think I've met an owner or an entrepreneur who has sold their company that hasn't had that same issue on when do you tell, how do you tell? And I'd really love to hear your perspective on that. And so the one thing to add for me, it was really, oh no, I'll wait. I'm sure you're going to touch on that later. So
Well,
I'll just leave it here.
I think, and I'll say this up front, is that I had expectations, like when I was working for a company that was in the process of being sold, and I had certain expectations on what I thought was reasonable for management. And now, with a few more gray hairs in my beard, I'm looking back and thinking my expectations probably weren't realistic. They weren't fair to the ownership of the company because I expected the moon, right? And who the heck was I? I was just, program whatever, program manager, program director. And so I just say that to caveat this up front. But my experience was it was more work for me because I was being expected to produce a bunch of different reports and slice and dice data in ways that I'd never seen it before. And ultimately, it's, am I going to have a job? What I say
Yeah.
all the time is like people want to know three things. Your employees want to know three things. What is my job? What is my job going to, or will I have a job in 6 months? And what is my job going to be in 6 months, right? And those are like the three basic things that you need to make sure that your team knows on a daily basis. You can't be happy if you don't know what your job is. You can't be happy if there's uncertainty about your future, because what happens then is people start looking for other jobs.
Yeah.
And the best ones, the most qualified ones, get other jobs. And what you're left with is the people that couldn't get other jobs. So you're left with
Yeah.
an underperforming team. But my experience was just wanting to know what the future held. And I'll just use one example. And I was told that Like, don't lie. Like, not giving information to your team, like, that's understandable.
Yeah,
But don't lie to your team. And I was
exactly.
told that there will be no changes happening. Like, once it was out of the bag that we were going through this acquisition, it's like, but don't worry, there will be zero changes happening. And to me, that was offensive. Like, I got offended by that because I have a brain and I know that there's going to be some changes,
Yeah.
right? Like, if you're going to lie to me, at least make it believable. Something's going to change, right? And I'm not saying, like, 80% of the workforce, this isn't an Elon Musk takeover or anything. So I'm not saying it needs to be drastic, but when you sit there and you tell me that don't worry, nothing's going to change, then in my mind, that actually made them lose all credibility because I'm like,
Yeah.
they're lying to me, obviously. So what else are they going to lie about?
Yeah.
And it was a challenging situation for me.
Yeah, it really is challenging. And so telling the truth, yes, absolutely. But there are points where if you're just entertaining an offer, you don't even know if you're
Right.
going to accept it or how it's going to go down the process. You also don't want to rock the boat. So there's
Right.
always this fine line,
Yep.
right? But then there comes a point, and to me that point is sooner rather than later, depending how far you've got. If you know you're going to go through this process and you've accepted it, and you know you're going to do it, it is better to share sooner rather than later, I believe, because it depends on your culture, right? Like, we had an open
Fair.
culture, we
Yeah.
shared everything, numbers, everything was transparent.
Yep.
So now all of a sudden I wasn't being as transparent as I normally am. So it was really relieving when we could share and we
Right.
could say. And then we also talked about what will happen if we sell.
Right. Right. In a realistic way. And yeah, the conversation doesn't need to happen on day one. I think you would be doing
Yeah,
your team a disservice if you're like,
yeah,
hey, I'm talking to potential buyers, because that's just going to provide uncertainty for them
yeah,
and they're going to have questions and you don't have the answers to those. So it's
exactly.
like, wait until you actually have some answers before you let them in. Otherwise, you're just making them worry over something they have no control over. And frankly, you don't even have any control over
No,
at that point.
100%. You said that perfectly. I agree.
So and I don't think this was a big, like you said, you had a really good collaboration with RWS, and things went pretty smoothly on that front. But a lot of times we talk to company owners that are interested in selling, and we ask them, who do you want to sell to? Right? One of the first conversations that we'll have with them is essentially, is there any company out there that you absolutely do not want to sell your company to? You don't like them, you hate their guts, or are there companies out there that you think would be a good fit for your company? Did this come across at all in your process when you were entertaining offers or doing the outreach to potential buyers?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh.
Really early on in the process, it was one of the first conversations I had with Renato. We were in, I think, Lock World, Warsaw
Hmm.
in 2018, August. And I had already kind of developed a bit of a hit list, like a yes and no list of exactly that, companies I would want to sell to and companies I wouldn't. And my criteria for that was I wanted to be able to keep my team intact. I wanted to sell to a company whose company culture fit mine, where I know my team would be respected, and I wanted a buyer who didn't want to disassemble what we had built, but instead position my company as basically, you can take this and add it on to what you're doing, but let us do what we do, because that's where the value is. So those were some really important criterias that we talked about, and RWS was on the top of that list.
Nice.
And that's what ended up happening. So it was really interesting. And then Renato, obviously, because Renato knows everybody and everybody knows Renato in the industry,
For better or
basically
worse.
reached out. Yeah.
Hey, he's the one that
Um,
stood us up. I can give him a little shit on
that's right.
this. Yeah.
That's right. I was so looking forward to finally seeing him again, because I haven't been doing anything in the industry for 4 years. And so I was, yeah,
Well,
that's
reach
right.
out, reach out. Like
We
I said,
should give him a hard time.
Adi's been keeping him busy over there in Ghana. So
Yeah, yeah, good, good. No, so that was really important to me, and I keeping my team intact as much as we could. And I knew there was going to be integration, of course, and there was going to be a little bit of a rebrand down the road. But from the get-go, they agreed that they wanted to keep this intact as, its unit. And they did for a long time.
Nice. I see we actually have a question from somebody in chat here. People that
About
aren't
the
trying to promote.
MBO?
About MBO. Did you consider an MBO in your process? And I'm going to show my ignorance here. I'm not even sure. MBO. When I think MBO, I think management by objective.
Yep. No, management buyout.
Management buyout. See,
Yeah, where you're selling your company to your management team.
got it. Okay. I told you I'm not super involved with this, so I don't know the lingo. Did you consider an MBO? Talk a little bit about that, maybe.
That is a great question. I didn't really, and simply, well, I did, but I didn't know enough at the time. And I didn't, like, I did talk about it. My COO and I talked about it, but it just didn't seem feasible at the time, financially or structurally or however we wanted to do it. And so it just wasn't a good fit. But what I know now, so especially in the US, there's a good friend of mine does this. He doesn't do exits, but what he does is he specializes in the MBOs. And he's created a process. And again, it doesn't apply in Canada because it has to do with tax and IRS and all of that stuff. But he has a process that is really genius on how to structure an MBO, or how to even set up your owners with phantom shares that they can later then redeem. It increases retention. It does a lot of good things. I'm not an expert in that process, but yes, if I had known then, or what I know now, I probably would have considered it more seriously. But I'm happy with how things turned out. But it is definitely a great process. And if you're in the US and you want an intro to, the guy who's the genius on this, just shoot me an email and I'm happy to connect you.
Yeah, like I said, hindsight's always 20/20.
Yeah.
So, well, we're watching the clock here, and I'd like to talk to you about life after exit. What have you found? Like, you had this plan to sell your company, and had big plans to go out there. What does life look like to you? Was it like 3 years later now? 4 years later?
Yeah, almost 4. January 16th will be 4 years.
Yeah. So 4 years later, what does it look like for you? Give us a vision for the other folks out there that are potentially considering their exit as well.
Yeah. So I was going to take a year off, was my plan. And I took about 6 months off because I'm an entrepreneur and I wanted to start writing my book.
That's what people like you do. Yeah.
That's right. But it was also, so for me, life after exit really wasn't that different. So a lot of people who are really involved in their companies, it's like, okay, now what do I do now? But because I didn't work in my company very much, my life didn't change much. I did miss my team. That was weird, not, talking to people and not having any aid to do all of the things that I'm not good at and I don't like doing was challenging. But my life didn't really change. It wasn't like, oh, now I finally get to do all of the things that I couldn't do when I had my business. That sense of freedom was already there for me over the past 10, 15 years because of how I built up my company. So it wasn't this, big moment. And I kind of missed it a little bit because I thought, okay, now I've made it and now I've sold my company. And it's like that feeling that I thought I was going to have never really came because not that much really changed. What did change, what I struggled with a little bit, honestly, is not having the cash flow.
Right.
So yes, I mean, I sold to a publicly traded company. Anybody can look up how much money I got for my company. And it was a considerably large amount for me. I didn't come from background of money or anything like that, right? Yeah. So not having cash flow was this really scary thing. It's like, okay, I've worked for this little chunk of change for 25 years.
That's it. And it's like, that's it. I'm not getting anything more. It's gone.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. And so that was really, really scary. we joked. I think that one night we were sitting on the couch and trying to find a movie, and my partner's on iTunes, and I'm like, is there nothing free on Netflix? And he's like, you're kidding me right now, right? I'm like, no, I'm really not.
Right. Right. I hear that. I hear
But
that.
then, yeah, so I did know that I wanted to dabble in coaching. So I started writing my book. I took a coaching course. I got my degree, like my certification as an executive coach. And then I just kind of tried things on slowly.
Yep.
So I started getting a couple of clients. I started getting invited to some podcasts, and I purposely said, I just want to take this slow, one client at a time, because what if I don't love it? What if I just think I love it? Right. So it's one of the great opportunities when you've had an exit to give yourself permission to try some other things.
Yeah.
I started painting. So I'm an artist now. I'm actually talking to a gallery to put some of my art in there. So,
Nice.
explore some fun stuff. And I really, what came together for me when I wrote my book, and what I'm really passionate about is I basically went and said, okay, so what did I do well over the past 25 years or the past 10 or the past 15 to get my business to this point where I've been enjoying my life. I've been traveling. I've been focusing focusing on what I love best in my business, which is strategy and looking forward. What did I do, and how can I share that knowledge with other entrepreneurs who want to do the same? Because I'm a member of Entrepreneurs Organization, which is a global organization of entrepreneurs. And I see so many people that can't get out of their business. So when I was developing my book, I was really kind of focusing on that process that I kind of just touched on and scratched the surface of earlier, to kind of say, okay, what I did well, how can I share that with other people, both in my book, both in my speaking and in my coaching practice as well. And I've just really, like, at the beginning, I wasn't sure. Let's see. It was like, I'm trading my time for money. I'm not used to trading my time for money. I'm used to having a business that runs without me and generates cash flow.
Yep.
And now I'm trading my time for money. So I wasn't sure if I would love it. And I can tell you, Tucker, I have found my passion. I love what I'm doing. I love working with clients. I love sharing what I've learned, what's worked for me with other entrepreneurs. And yeah, I'm all in. I really, really enjoy what I'm doing now.
Nice. Yeah, it's a good feeling to be able to give back in a
Yeah.
way, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
mean, and yeah, sure, you're charging money for it, right?
Yeah, of
And
course.
just like Nimsy does, we charge money
Yeah.
for it too. But still, it's a good feeling to kind of take all of those hard knocks that you've been through and hopefully try to guide some people in a way where they don't need to make as many mistakes as you do through it.
Yeah, exactly. And I do donate like 30% of my time. I work with startups. I'm part of the UN mentorship program
Yep.
for women entrepreneurs. So I have a couple of companies under my wing that I coach for free, just because I want to give back. And these are women with smaller companies, lots of potential. The lady I'm coaching right now, she's in Malaysia, and she's like tripled her business. And
Nice.
it's just
So,
so
a,
rewarding
a
to
lot of
see the
times,
progress that she's making.
yeah, and a lot of times these guys, like, they got good heads on their shoulders. They got the passion. They've got everything that they need, and it legit just needs a little bit of guidance. Like, tweak
Yeah,
this and tweak that, and boom, they
yeah,
blow up. And that is so rewarding.
exactly.
We do the same here at Nimsy Insights. And well, I should say Renato does a lot of it, most of it,
It
but
just feels really good.
yeah,
It's like it's this dichotomy. Yes, I love working with companies that already have systems in place where the CEO wants to offboard, and I'll work with them and I'll work with their team together, which is great. And there is just also, it's so rewarding to work with smaller companies, just pro bono, to help them out and see them thrive. It's
yeah.
just really, really cool.
Well, let's I want to give this one more plug here. The website, I put a link to it here on LinkedIn, but make sure on low hanging fruit right here, you can follow Michele on LinkedIn here to stay up to date. You can go check out her website, michelehecken.com. And I specifically wanted to call out the fun and fearless leadership tips section here, where she's got some some blogs, really good stuff in here. Like if you like what we've been talking about today and want to go a little bit deeper, I would recommend you go check this out, get inspired, learn some new things. And with that, Michele, any closing arguments or last words before we sign off for the day here?
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm so thrilled to have had the opportunity to chat with you, and I'm gonna hound Renato to say, okay, we got to still do this again with you. And I'm happy to be on here. And like I said at the beginning, I'm really grateful because Nimdzi really did help me find the right buyer at the right price, and you guys did a great job. So highly recommend Nimdzi if you're looking at that. And please, yeah, they were awesome.
Well, thank you. And just once that book is out, give us a call back and we'll have you on the podcast again because I want to dig deeper on it.
Sounds great.
All right. All right, I'll take us out here. Ladies, gentlemen, chat, we are out of time for today. If you enjoyed this episode of Nimdzi Live, then make sure that you are subscribing to Nimdzi Insights so that you will be notified next time that we schedule a live event or when we publish new research. Just as a heads up here, we do have an event on the calendar for next week when we are talking with Amy Ansari from Translators Without Borders, and they're doing some really interesting stuff over there at Translators Without Borders. Check out their website or dial in, call in, log in next week to find out here on Nimdzi Live. Once again, and finally, my name is Tucker Johnson, host of Nimdzi Live, and it has been my pleasure to join you all today. I appreciate our guest, Michele Hecken. I appreciate my colleagues here at Nimdzi Insights doing all of the hard work so that I can have these fun conversations. I appreciate everybody in our industry that fills out our research and helps us contribute to the industry in that way. And last but not least, I appreciate you guys in chat for making it a lively conversation today. And with that, I will bid you adieu until next time. Cheers.